I don't know where the county is on that. Maybe we can get an update on that. But anyways, I'll call the meeting to order at 9:30. And we'll start with a roll call, please.
Thank you. Good morning. District 2. District 3. Banning. Beaumont.
Here.
Calamasa.
Here.
Canyon Lake. Cathedral City.
Here.
Coachella. Desert Hot Springs.
Present.
Lake Elsinore.
Here.
Palm Desert.
Here.
Palm Springs.
Present.
San Jacinto. Riverside.
Here.
Wildemar.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right.
District 2 is here.
Thank you. And I think District 3 is joining as well.
Okay, great. Let's move to the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Molina, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, thank you. If you'll put your hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4 is public comments. Are there any public comments for items listed not on the agenda?
I'm not seeing anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, great. Any additions or revisions to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right. Is there anyone, we'll move to item 6, consent calendar. Anyone wish to speak on the consent calendar or ask for items to be removed? Seeing none, as we move forward, if you make a motion, please identify who you are, what city, and also on your second. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Calamasa approves.
Second, Cathedral City.
Thank you. District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
Beaumont?
Yes.
Banning? Calamasa?
Yes.
Canyon Lake? Cathedral City?
Yes.
Coachella?
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs?
Aye.
Lake Elsinore?
Aye.
Palm Desert?
Yes.
Palm Springs? San Jacinto? Riverside?
Yes.
Wildemar?
Yes.
Thank you. That item does pass.
Thank you. Item 7 is the proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22. And we have a report from Michelle Cisneros.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. The last committee meeting, staff had presented the initial executive summary for the fiscal year 22 budget. Today, I will present the complete budget document for your final review and approval. The following slides will provide an overview of the activities included in next year's budget. Next slide. Since the budget was last presented to the committee, staff continued to reconcile and analyze data. We have made adjustments to fiscal year 21 projections and fiscal year 22 budget amounts, resulting in an increase of $50.3 million to fund balance reserves. Some of the significant adjustments include a $15 million increase to our Measure A sales tax revenues for both fiscal years 21 and 22, a $5 million increase in our LTF sales tax revenues for both fiscal year 21 and 22, a $4.6 million increase in our capital local streets and roads expenditures for both fiscal year 21 and 22. And these Measure A sales tax revenues are returned to the local jurisdictions. A net $1.3 million increase in our fiscal year 22 local reimbursements for the 91 corridor operations project. A $1.2 million increase in fiscal year 22 salary and benefit expenditures for the reorganization and staffing level increases to meet the current required task and demands in the toll operations and the capital development and delivery programs. And a net $19.5 million decrease in fiscal year 22 operating and capital disbursement expenditures after final review of the transit operator SRTPs. None of these adjustments affected the Commission's ability to fund any project or program in fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. After staff's final analysis and reconciling the adjustments to the initial budget as noted in the previous slide, staff is projecting that we will begin the new fiscal year with $1 billion in fund balance reserves. Fiscal year 22 estimated sources are budgeted at $1.6 billion and estimated uses at $1.7 billion. The budget anticipates that uses will exceed sources by $108 million, resulting in the use of project and program fund balance reserves, primarily for the 15 express lanes completion, the Lake Elsinore 15 Railroad Canyon, the 79 realignment, the Mid-County Parkway, including the 215 Placentia interchange and its second construction project, the closeout of the 91 project, and the Coachella Valley Measure A and Highway regional and the regional arterial projects. Of the $909 million projected ending fund balance reserves, 99.5% is restricted for specific projects and programs that are funded by Measure A, PA, TUMP, motorist assistance, and toll operations. The remaining 0.5% is assigned for management services. Next slide. This table presents the fiscal year comparison of all commission revenues and sources. For fiscal year 22, the Measure A and LTF sales tax revenues are based on economic data that's been provided by the Commission's sales tax consultant, as well as current trends. Sales tax revenues have performed surprisingly better than we expected during the pandemic, and this is due to online sales and to the Measure A sales taxes that are assessed based on destination versus point of sale. As noted in the previous slide, staff has revised the Measure A and LTF sales tax projections. Measure A went from $195 million to $210 million, and LTF from $100 million to $105 million for both fiscal years 21 and 22. The STA sales taxes is generated from a statewide tax on diesel fuel and is allocated by the state based on population and as a percentage of transit fares, and it includes the SB1 state of good repair revenues. Our federal, state, and local revenues are on a reimbursement basis, and they will be received by the Commission as eligible project costs are incurred. Some of the significant project reimbursements include the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange and its second construction project, the 7191 connector, the 60 truck lanes, the 15 express lanes southern extension, the 91 corridor operations project, the 1591 express lanes connector, the Harupa and McKinley Avenue grade separation projects, as well as rail station rehabilitation and improvements. TUMP revenues include the Commission's share of the TUMP fees, and they remain flat for fiscal year 22. Estimated tolls, penalties, and fees reflect a 105% increase, and they include the 91 express lanes revenues at $41.5 million for the fifth full year of operations and $23.6 million for the first full year of the 15 express lanes. Our debt proceeds of about $668 million reflects the one-time refinancing of the 91 express lanes 2013 toll bonds and TIFIA loan, and will be offset by the related one-time debt service payment. Our TIFIA loan proceeds reflect the final drawdown of the TIFIA loan, and this is to fund the 15 express lanes project. And our transfers in are primarily for debt service funding, the 15 express lanes project, the 1591 express lanes connector, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange, and rail maintenance and operations. Next slide, please. This slide provides the summary breakdown of the Commission's costs by program, and in the next few slides, I will discuss these in a bit more detail. Management services comprised of executive management, administration, external affairs, and finance represents only 1% of total uses. Regional programs is comprised of planning and programming, rail and maintenance and operations, commuter assistance, motorist assistance, and regional conservation represents 11% of total uses. The capital projects development and delivery program is a significant part of the Commission's budget at 32% of total uses and illustrates the Commission's core project-driven environment. Our toll operations program at 3% of total uses reflects an operations component to the Commission, and it includes the first full year of the 15 express lanes and the 5th full year of the 91 express lanes. Debt service of 42% of the total uses includes $646 million one-time expense for the refinancing of the 91 express lanes 2013 toll bonds and TIFIA loan. This one-time expense reflects the refunded principal and interest of about $496 million, cost of issuance of $2.8 million, and payment to escrow agent for about $147.4 million. The debt service payment is offset by the debt proceeds mentioned in the previous slide. The remaining balance of about $83 million reflects the principal and interest payments for the Measure A sales tax revenue bonds and toll bonds that have funded capital projects. Our transfers out at 11% of total uses relates primarily to transfers for debt service funding, the 15 Express Lanes project, the 1591 Express Lanes connector, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange, and rail maintenance and operations. Next slide, please. Management services departments perform the Commission's overall support functions and represents about 1% of the Commission's total budget. Excluding transfers out, management services reflects a 4% increase from the fiscal year 21 revised budget due to FTE allocations, the addition of 1 FTE for the community engagement manager that was approved by the executive committee in May. And this was part of the reorganization to meet our current task and demands, as well as professional support and regional conservation management, as well as commission insurance. At 31%, administration includes commission office operations, IT, human resources, and commissioner support. At 45%, the finance includes the external audits, finance and investment consultants, general business insurance, and the implementation of a new financial resource planning system. External affairs at 18% consists of legislative and communication support related to the transportation, infrastructure interest, and public outreach. The remaining 6% reflects the executive management to manage activities of the Commission's policies, projects, and its overall services of the county. And our transfers out reflect the funding of a portion of the Western County debt service. Next slide. Several departments reside within our regional programs, which represents about 11% of the Commission's total budget. Public and specialized transit is the largest program at 67% and reflects an increase based on the final SRTPs that were submitted by the transit operators. The increase from the revised fiscal year 21 budget is due to decreased subsidy needs in the previous year that resulted from available federal COVID relief funding. Rail maintenance and operations at 22% includes Metrolink operations support and maintenance of the 9 Commission-owned and operated commuter rail stations. The fiscal year 22 budgeted decrease from the fiscal year 21 is primarily due to the inability to obtain access agreements with the host railroads for the Indio Special Events Train platform for the Coachella Valley San Gorgonio Pass corridor rail service. The remaining regional programs include planning and programming at 4% for transportation funding coordination in the region, commuter assistance at 2% for promoting multimodal transportation options, motorist assistance at 3% for motorist aid system in the county, and regional conservation at 2% for RCA management. As you know, the Commission became the managing agency for RCA in January of 2021. And our transfers out are primarily related to public and specialized transit for LTF allocations and to the general fund for administration, planning and programming, and rail operations. Next slide, please. The Capital Projects Development and Delivery Program, excluding transfers out, is the most significant program and reflects 32% of the Commission's total budget. Salaries and benefits, professional services, and support costs are only 1% of the capital program budget. Outside of salaries and benefits, the bulk of the costs relate to general legal services, specialized legal, and general professional services for rail station development and rehabilitation. The program operations are 1%, and it includes the Bechtel infrastructure program management activities, project support, and rail station maintenance. In the next slide, I'll discuss the engineering, construction, design build, and right-of-way activities. Our local streets and roads expenditures reflect the Measure A sales tax revenues that are dispersed back to the local jurisdictions. The regional arterials reflects the Measure A disbursements to the Coachella Valley for its highway and regional arterial programs. The debt service at 9% relates to the payment of debt on the 2009 Measure A sales tax revenue bonds. And the transfers out at 18% include transfers for debt service funding, the 15 Express Lanes project, the 15 Corridor Operations project, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange, MSHCP funding reimbursement, and administration allocations. Next slide, please. So our engineering, construction, design build, and our right-of-way represents the largest group of expenditures for the capital projects and delivery program at 57%. These expenditures will be funded with the new revenues and financing sources, as well as special revenue and capital project fund balance reserves. Some of our significant capital projects identified for fiscal year 22 include activities to complete the 15 express lanes, the construction and design build activities for the 1591 Express Lanes connector that's funded by primarily by SB 132, construction activities on the 91 Corridor Operations project, wrap up various activities on the 91 project primarily related to right-of-way, engineering, construction, and right-of-way activities on the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange and its second construction project, and construction activities on the 60 truck lanes project. Other capital projects will include the 7191 connector, the 15 Express Lanes Southern Extension, the 15 Corridor Operations project, the Pachapa Underpass, the Harupa McKinley Avenue grade separation projects, and various rail and regional arterial projects. Next slide, please. So fiscal year 22 will mark the 5th full year of operations for the 91 Express Lanes and the first full year for the 15 Express Lanes. Our toll and non-toll revenues are based on current traffic, revenue, and trend data. The 46% increase over fiscal year 21 projected actuals is reflective of the first full year of the 15 Express Lanes operations. In March of 2020, the Commission approved the refinancing of the 91 Express Lanes 2013 toll bonds and TIFIA loan in order to achieve debt service savings and to increase the ability to fund and accelerate 91 corridor projects with surplus toll revenues. The refunding or the refinancing was postponed due to the COVID-19 and the market disruptions that it had caused. Staff is currently updating the traffic and revenue projections and the financial modeling so that the revised documents can be brought back to the Commission for approval, hopefully this fall if market conditions are right. Debt proceeds reflect the one-time refinancing of the 91 Express Lanes 2013 toll bonds and TIFIA loan. The personnel salaries and benefits represents 5% of total expenses when excluding debt service and transfers out. The 54% increase from the fiscal year 21 projected actuals reflects the change in the FTE allocations for the first full year of the 15 Express Lanes operations, the addition of 3 new positions related to the reorganization of the toll program that was approved by the Executive Committee in May, and a 4% pull for performance merit-based salary increases. Professional and support costs represents 27% of total expenses when excluding debt service and transfers out, and it includes the system, equipment, and road maintenance, the insurance, violation enforcement, consulting services, and marketing. The increase from the fiscal year 21 projected actuals reflects the first full year of the 15 express lanes. Program operations reflects 69% of the total expenses when excluding debt service and transfers out. It consists of the contracted operators' expenses related to operating and maintaining the toll lane hardware and software, the customer service center, toll processing, violation collection and processing, as well as the required repair and rehabilitation of the 91 express lanes. The 110% increase from the fiscal year 21 projected actuals reflects the first full year of the 15 express lanes operations and the required repair and rehabilitation of the 91 express lanes. The capital outlay at less than 1% includes the transition to the national 6C transponder technology. Debt service primarily reflects $646 million one-time expense for the refunding of the 91 express lanes toll bonds and prepayment of the TIFIA loan. This one-time cost in fiscal year 22 is offset by the debt proceeds, as previously mentioned, and it is needed in order to achieve the debt service savings to the Commission, as well as increase our ability to fund and accelerate 91 corridor projects with surplus toll revenues. And our transfers out include the Commission's authorization to use surplus toll revenues for the 1591 lanes connector project and for administrative cost allocations to the general fund. Next slide, please. This slide provides the Commission's budget by function. The largest categories include projects and operations at 43%, debt service at 42%, and transfers out at 11%. Only 4% is related to personnel, professional services, support, and capital lay expenditures. Our personnel costs increased, and it includes the full year of additional staff for the regional conservation and maintaining the management services levels, the reinstatement of funding for 4 previously approved positions, a 4% pull for performance merit-based salary increases, an annual salary range adjustment, as well as action that was taken by the Executive Committee in May to add 3 new positions related to the reorganization of the toll program and 1 new position for community engagement. Our professional services are expected to decrease due to the completion of the traffic relief plan, refocusing rail operations planning efforts, and change in the hosting the regional rideshare van pool system platforms. Our support costs are expected to increase about 5%, primarily for support and maintenance of toll operations, which includes the first full year of the 15 express lanes. Projects and operations are expected to increase due to the capital project activities that were noted in the capital project highlight slide. Our debt service reflects a significant increase due to the one-time expense for the refinancing of the principal and interest of the 91 Express Lanes 2013 toll bonds and prepayment of the TIFIA loan as noted in the toll operations slide. Our transfers out include the debt service funding for, as well as transfers for the 15 Express Lanes project, the 15 corridor operations project, the 1591 Express Lanes connector, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia Avenue interchange, MSHCP funding reimbursement, administrative allocations, and public and specialized transit allocations for rail station operations and rehabilitation. It's important to note that the primary sources to fund our projects and operations come from new revenues, transfers, debt proceeds, as well as our fund balance reserves. Next slide, please. Measure A limits the Commission's administrative salaries and benefits to 1% of the total Measure A sales tax revenues. In addition, the Commission had adopted a policy for total administrative costs not to exceed 4% of total Measure A sales tax revenues, inclusive of the 1% cap on salaries and benefits. For fiscal year 22, this graph shows that the administrative salaries and benefits at 0.71%. And in regard to the board adopted policy limiting total administrative cost to 4%, we're projecting those costs at 1.92%, which is well below the total Measure A administrative cap of 4%. Next slide, please. So the budget presented to you includes staff's final review and analysis, as well as the executive committee's reorganization and staffing levels that were approved in May. Staff is recommending the following actions: to close the public hearing on June 9th, approve the salary schedule effective July 1st, 2021, located in Appendix B of the budget document, approve the revised Measure A and LTF sales tax revenue projections and the related expenditure budget adjustments for fiscal year 21, approve the revised Measure A and LTF sales tax revenue projections for fiscal year 22, and to adopt the proposed budget on June 9th. Any additional input can be made today with the expectation that the public hearing will be closed and the fiscal year 22 budget adopted on June 9th, as our commission policies do require the adoption by June 15th. This concludes my presentation, and I thank you for your time, and I look to you for input and suggestions.
Thank you. Do we have anyone wishing to speak public comments at this point?
I'm not seeing any members of the public with their hands raised, but Supervisor Spiegel does have her hand raised.
Got it. Supervisor Spiegel, you're up.
Michelle, that was an excellent report. Very thorough, in depth. I'm sure many of us got lost on a couple of parts. If you blinked your eyes and weren't following, you were on the next item. So very in depth. One question I have is early on, and I couldn't even where it was, that you were talking about sales tax. And it was something popped out me when you said destination versus point of sale. Is that how we've always done it? I thought it was a point of sale. It's always been destination?
Our LTF sales taxes are based on point of sale. The Measure A sales taxes are based on destination.
Got it.
If I could maybe just interject on that one. Sometimes in the past on our sales tax presentations, on the revenue projections, the distinction there is primarily on larger ticket items like cars. Those automobile sales are based on where the automobile usage is assumed to be consumed. So that would be the county, would be assessed to the county where you live. So the example I usually brought up was if I live in San Bernardino County, but bought a car in Riverside County, that wouldn't help Measure A.
Did we lose Supervisor Spiegel? Well, we'll move on to Commissioner Gregory at this point.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation. As was shared, it was very well done. A lot in there, packed in there. And I don't really have a lot of questions on the data itself, but there is a new position called a Public Affairs Manager. And it looks like that's mostly funded or comes out of the External Affairs Department. I thought somewhere in there, I thought I said 20% comes out of the admin portion. If we could just get a quick explanation of what is that job and how does that fit in with the External Affairs Director, the Public Affairs Manager, and other people in that department?
Okay, I'll take that. Thank you for the question. So the position, the new position is a community engagement manager. When the executive committee was considering organizational changes, an ad hoc committee of the executive committee was set up, a strategic organization planning ad hoc. So we had conversations about the organization, where we had gaps, where we had particular needs, and a recommendation came from that committee to add what we later titled a community engagement manager. The intent of that position is to increase and enhance our community engagement. I mean, we have lots of projects. We have, our public affairs department that does all of our social media and our outreach and our public meetings on projects. But what is becoming increasingly clear across the county is that we have a lot of our local agencies and member agencies where there's a lot going on in each of our jurisdictions. This position would allow us to engage more in support of RCTC board members on issues of importance in their community. We have been attending a lot of council meetings in Western Riverside County, and we've seen that it's been very, very beneficial for us to understand kind of some of the big issues going on in the jurisdictions. We're also seeing increasing demand for more stakeholder input and more stakeholder outreach and more engagement with other community and business groups. We also have a need for additional engagement with tribal governments. While many of our projects have specific tribal engagement related to monitoring of cultural resources during construction, we think it's important, given the breadth of our program, that we start establishing more proactive tribal government relationships and conversations so that we've built those relationships before the projects are implemented. So our goal with that position is to kind of up the ante in terms of our engagement in service of our member agencies and the communities and stakeholders and tribal governments. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Well, it does, and it does help answer also just my wondering, I guess, of why this was a management level. But what I'm hearing is you would need somebody with enough experience and horsepower to be able to speak or answer for the agency if they're going to be meeting with outside entities, and also enough to bring things back and share that information at the appropriate level. Am I reading that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardy, you'd like to speak.
Thank you so much. That was going back to Commissioner Gregory's question and comment. We had a really complete discussion on that. It was really an important discussion because one of the things that we feel that, as Ann said, we need to be proactive. The more information we have going in all directions, certainly the more effective RCTC is, and the better the public can respond to all the projects being done. However, my question is, every time I think I have the point of sale, point of use, just well understood, I get a little more confused. So between Teresa and Michelle, can you help us understand that give us a little clarity on that with the Measure A and that sort of thing? I would appreciate that, please.
Sure. I'll take a stab at it, Teresa. I'm going to use the same kind of example that Teresa used. I live in San Bernardino County, just like Teresa does, but I always buy my cars in Riverside County. Measure A does not get the sales tax for the purchase of my car, but LTF does. And the reason, the destination is that San Bernardino, my car is being destined to San Bernardino County. So SBCTA is going to get the sales tax on their Measure I, because that's the destination, is where the car is going to.
So any Measure A would be the point of purchase?
No.
And perceived use, or?
Measure A is going to be the destination.
Okay.
So wherever the product is going to go, that's the county, or that's going to receive the benefit of the sales tax. So all the online sales, I think, is indicative of the destination, why our Measure A money has gone up, we're surprisingly better than we expected because of all of the online sales, Amazon destination coming, to your home. So whatever county you're in.
Okay.
Hopefully I made that clear.
I will process again. Thank you so much. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any on the board or anyone with a hand raised. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Palm Desert, so moved.
Cathedral City will second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
I am a yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Excellent report, yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside,
Yes.
Oldemar.
Yes.
Thank you. That item passes.
All right, item number 8 is recurring contracts for fiscal year 21-22, and we'll get a report from Jose Mendoza.
Good morning, Chair White, and good morning, members of the committee. I have a brief PowerPoint to share for my presentation. This agenda item is to recommend the committee's approval of a limited number of multi-year professional services contracts under the recurring contracts process. Next slide, please. As part of the annual budget process, staff evaluates existing contracts that are set to expire within the next fiscal year. Contracts are then either placed on the calendar for a new procurement solicitation, allowed to expire because they're no longer required, or they're included in the annual recurring contracts list. Most of the contracts reviewed by staff are subject to a competitive process. However, consultants on the recurring contracts list, listed on the current slide, are included because they're providing unique or specialized services and or are working closely with staff on long-term projects. Therefore, staff desires to retain a limited number of consultants because of their historical knowledge, their unique experience, and their understanding of the commission and specific commission projects. Your approval today will allow the commission to continue to work on existing projects without interruptions while maintaining consistency on those projects. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of a total of 15 single-year contracts on the fiscal year 2021 recurring contracts list. Next slide, please. And in addition to the single-year contracts, staff is recommending approval of 6 multi-year contracts for specialized services on long-term projects. The 6 multi-year contracts presented on this slide and the 15 single-year contracts presented on the previous slide are included in your agenda packet, along with the narrative for each, justifying their inclusion on the recurring contracts list. Next slide, please. The final thing that I want to highlight is that the total aggregate amount for the fiscal year 21-22 recurring contracts shows a decrease of $200,357 compared to the aggregate amount in the current fiscal year 2021 for the same recurring contracts. So overall, we are showing a decrease in expenditures for these recurring contracts, which is why staff believes it is both more efficient and cost-effective to retain the consultants on the list rather than rebidding these services at this particular time. Next slide, please. In closing, staff recommends the committee to approve the list of single-year recurring contracts for fiscal year 21-22, approve the list of multi-year contracts for specialized services on long-term projects through fiscal year 25-26, authorize the chair or executive director pursuant to legal counsel review to execute the agreements on behalf of the commission, and finally, for the committee to forward to the commission for final action. Next slide, please. This concludes my brief presentation. I'd be happy to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Supervisor Spiegel, I see you have your hand raised.
Can you go back to the slide with all the contracts, the 21, 22 ones? What is, can you share what the OCTA, the 864 drop, 864,000 drop?
Yes, so looking at the OCTA notes, there is a $865,000 decrease. That's primarily due to the reduction in the credit card fees, transponder costs, and also third-party contract costs administered by the TSP or the toll services provider.
Is that because we're picking up some of that here in Riverside County? People switching transponder? I'm just curious why there's a drop.
I wouldn't be able to have that answer for you right now. I'm looking to see if I have the project manager for the contract. I don't see her, so we can provide that info for the commission staff report.
Okay. And the other question on the multi-year, can I see that slide? The multi-year, Okay, never mind. You took out the, because I think I was reading that it was from the 21-22 through 2026 was only 2 point something, and yet it's showing a little bit higher. So I was trying to figure that one out.
Right, the 25-26 contracts is only the two contracts for ThyssenKrupp and Trillium. The other 4 contracts are one's a 2-year term and the other one's a 3-year term. So that's probably the difference there.
So is the amount in the 3-year contract and the 2-year contract in the total of the contracts for, I just remember it being two, whatever it was on that last slide. And this is saying 3.9 million and 184,000. So I'm just trying to figure out what numbers are we looking at? Is it just 22, 23 through 2026?
Right, so the multi-year contracts, there's $2 amounts there. There's a 1.3 million for just for the first year, the fiscal year 21-22. And then the subsequent years for the 6 multi-year contracts is a total of 2.8 million.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else's hands raised. Do we have any comments from the public?
I am not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion.
The Cathedral City moves to approve.
Beaumont will second that.
Thank you. District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside,
Yes.
Wildemar, Wildemar.
Yes.
Thank you. That item passes.
Thank you. Item 9 is the approval of Metrolink operating and capital subsidies for fiscal year 21-22 and related memorandum of understanding. And Sheldon Peterson, you have a report for us.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'll follow up on the budget discussions today with a review of the annual Metrolink budget and just kind of go through some of the performance over the past year or so. Next slide. So Metrolink is operated by a 5-county JPA and RCTC is one of those members. Through the years, we've made significant rail investments with 3 lines serving the county, the Riverside line, the IOC line, and the 91 Paris Valley line, which we extended in 2016. There's 9 stations that we support, which is different than other member agencies as we fully fund and pay for the operations at all the stations. This focus will be discussing about how we fund Metrolink, a little bit separate than the stations. Next slide. As we all know, FY21 has been a rough year with the pandemic. So Metrolink's been focused on implementing a recovery plan, waiting for conditions to change to address any safety issues and add back trains when the time is right. However, during this time, they have updated and awarded a number of contracts, both for operations and track and signals, identified performance improvements, and also some cost efficiencies. So that has been very helpful. They've also identified some new promotions to target riderships to get people back on the trains, including Kids Fried Free on weekends, a new loyalty program, and a 5-day pass focused on helping telecommuters go in when they need to and have some flexibility. During lulls in service, they've actually enhanced the capital rehabilitation program and updated some of the track and infrastructure during this time. Next slide. When we look at the ridership decline, basically from the startup pandemic, there were some huge drops initially on a number of the routes. As time went on, you can see a couple of lines improved and started to do well until we hit that 3rd wave where there was another big dip in January. Since then, they've started to recover as well. So we got about 75% drop on the 91 PBL, 77% drop on the IOC, and a continued decline of 91% on the Riverside line. On the next slide. When we look at the Riverside line, though, there is a service reduction of about 30%. So one of the challenges with that particular line is where we've only had 12 trains to begin with. We're currently only running 7 of those trains. So with limited service, we'll probably keep those numbers low until we're able to add those trains back on. So with the COVID as well, we focused on essential workers, both in healthcare and law enforcement. We focus on cleaning and sanitizing the equipment, maintaining social distancing. There was even an app available so people could identify how many people were on the trains to kind of plan out their schedule to make sure they go on a lower ridership train if that was their preference. The number of surveys have been conducted. The latest one showed that it's optimistic that there will be an 86% return of riders once people actually go back into work locations. Next slide. So with the ridership recovery, early on, Metrolink identified 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 was potentially a worst case, scenario 2, middle of the road, and scenario 3 was the most optimistic at the beginning of the pandemic. As time went on, we identified that scenario 2, middle of the road, was a good place to look. We identified a scenario 2A to kind of track where we were performing. And then after the 3rd wave, we developed a new scenario 2B that actually shows a slower ridership return based on the impacts of these waves of COVID. So we're tracking at about 16% return in the 2nd quarter. Going forward, it does show a slow return to 100% basically until the end of FY23 to get back to normal ridership levels. Next slide. So FY22 will focus on that recovery, looking at the framework as well, trying to restore the service. The current budget maintains that 30% reduction, but there is hopes to add more trains once ridership regains. There is an aggressive marketing program to regain that ridership. And part of that also includes a trial low-income fare to address equity issues as well, to reduce that barrier to taking Metrolink for a number of our riders. Over time, we'll continue to improve the reliability, on-time performance, and customer experience for Metrolink, while always maintaining a focus on safety and reducing trespasser injuries. The other challenge for FY22 is Metrolink will need to appoint a new CEO and continue developing their system as well. Next slide. The financial impact directly to RCTC is net expenses minus the fare revenues become the operating subsidies. So for RCTC's share, next year will be $21.4 million. Of that, we'll continue to use the FTA CARES funds at roughly $10.3 million to hopefully fully draw down those grant funds for RCTC. We'll also use our local transportation funds at $10.3 million and the low carbon transit operation program funds at $864,000. In addition, Metrolink needs capital funds to improve their service and keep things in a state of good repair. The request this year was $4.2 million, and RCTC is fully funding that with both FTA 5337 grants and surplus grant funds. On the next slide, there's some action items, which would be approve those numbers for both the operating and capital budgets, and then provide the executive director authority to execute the annual memorandum of understanding, setting into place those financial requirements in an agreement between the 2 agencies. We request that you could forward this item to the commission for final approval. And with that, in the next slide, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on this item? And do we have any comments from the public? No comments from the public?
Not seeing any hands raised. No, sir.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion.
Spiegel will move.
Beaumont will second that. And could we get a roll call, please?
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside,
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yeah.
Thank you. That item passes.
Thank you. Item 10, fiscal year 21-22 short-range transit plan updates and transit funding allocations. And Eric DeHate has a presentation for us.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and fellow committee members. The item before you today is give you a brief presentation on the 21-22 SRTPs and also for the transit funding allocations. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of a picture of who actually provides transit services within Riverside County. Just wanted to give you at least a visual impact of all the different operators here within Riverside County. Next slide, please. So I took this opportunity to just give you a little bit of a definition of what really is a short-range transit plan. This plan is particularly a planning and programming document, and it's intended to serve multiple purposes. It really helps us to identify all of the services and capital improvements for the next 3 to 5 years. It helps management understand what's going to happen within the next year. It also provides justification for all of its state and federal grants. Next slide, please. We have a couple different roles within the SRTP development. RCTC's role is really oversight for state and federal regulations. We also provide a lot of the guidance and estimates for developing that SRTP as far as the outline and the layout. We also review the plans to make sure that they're actually constrained, that all of the operators are meeting fare box recovery ratio, and that if there's any major changes within operating capital needs. And then lastly, we provide that document to the commission for allocating of the funding. The transit operators, they do provide all their plans and capital needs for the next few years. They also provide their budget and what seems to be reasonable to carry out those operators' needs. They take their own SRTPs to their own boards and seek public comments for approval, and also provide RCTC with that final document for allocation of funds. Currently, we actually do this concurrently, so they take theirs at the same time that we're trying to take theirs to the commission. So that way they're both having a dual path. Next slide, please. So just like Sheldon had mentioned prior and Michelle had alluded to in her presentation, there's still a lot of uncertainty with COVID-19 restrictions. With social distancing, the mask requirements, you can only put so many people on a bus, so it is impacting ridership. So right now, transit operators themselves are entering this recovery period. As Sheldon had mentioned, Metrolink is looking at a recovery plan. All the other transit operators, bus operators are also looking for a recovery plan, trying to make sure and how they can sustain ridership. That recovery plan really encompasses two major components, looking at their service planning improvements. A lot of that has to do with longer term planning, a lot of studies. As you read through the SRTPs, a lot of the agencies are looking to try to refocus and change the way that they do business. They also are looking at some free fare programs, using a lot of the LC top programs. They're also trying to increase marketing, trying to get riders to get back onto the bus as allowable by CDC regulations. Trying to implement new services. As you'll see, RTA is trying to implement more services back in September and in January, and just in an effort to really rebuild its ridership. A lot of the capital improvement planning, as you'll notice when you look at the numbers, in 2021, a lot of the focus was trying to keep services going, and they deferred a lot of capital improvement programs to make sure that they can ensure ridership and for the essential workers were there. But in 21-22, a lot of them are looking at revitalizing and revamping their capital programs. RTA is replacing 70 buses over the next few years. A lot of them are upgrading computer softwares and trying to use better equipment so that way they can monitor ridership. And particularly in the desert area, Sunline is really trying to improve their facilities. As you'll notice, when you look at and read the report, projected ridership is about 20% lower than 2021, and the 21-22 is actually about 53% lower than the 19-20 plan ridership. Projected ridership is always a little bit on the conservative side, and so that way they're not trying to overestimate how many people will be on the bus or in their on the trains. Next slide, please. So here's the little breakdown of the overall funding. As you can see, the operating isn't really changing substantially from year to year. As you can see, the capital outlay is substantially larger, which does bring up about a 13% increase from 2021 to 21-22. Next slide, please. This is a little distribution by operator. As you can see, RTA, commuter rail Metrolink services, and also Sunline make up about 92% of all the funding. The remaining smaller agencies and smaller operations do make up about 8 to 9% of the total funding. Next slide, please. This is a little different picture of how we break down all that funding. As Michelle had alluded to before, that there is some changes and increases in transit costs, and that's just the separation of the pie. Last year in 21, federal subsidies ended up being about 66%. This year it's about 44%. State made up which is LTF and STA came up a little bit more. So you start to see the breakdown between the state and federal are pretty close. Of the federal funds, the majority of it is still federal stimulus. There's a lot of legacy CARES funds that were handed out that are still being utilized for this next fiscal year. In addition to that, there was the CRISA Act that was passed in January timeframe. And then shortly after that, we had the American Rescue Plan that was also passed, which includes the majority of that federal stimulus. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the conclusion of the SRTP documents themselves, and a little bit more about the highlights and also the financial overview. Staff is recommending that these draft SRTPs be approved and forwarded to the commission. That the committee also adopt resolution 2108, which is required to allocate LTF and STA for 21-22. Direct staff to add any federally funded projects into the FTIP and forward to the commission for final action. With that, that's the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this item before we vote on it? I'm not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and take a motion at this point.
Calamasa moves.
Springs seconds.
And could we get a roll call, please?
District 2?
Of the 718 pages that this item was, yes.
District 3? District 3? Beaumont?
Yes.
Calamasa?
Yes.
Cathedral City?
Yes.
Coachella?
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs?
Aye.
Lake Elsinore?
Aye.
Palm Desert?
Yes.
Palm Springs?
Aye.
Riverside?
Yes.
Wildemar? Thank you. That item passes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 11. Boy, all this budget fun today, huh? This is fiscal year 21-22 Transportation Development Act, Article 3, SB 821, call for project recommendations. And this is for Jenny Chan to provide a report.
Hi, good morning. Just to break up the flow a little bit today, I don't have a presentation, but I do have a map that I will show you a little bit later. So this item is for the committee to approve the project recommendations for the fiscal year 21-22 Transportation Development Act, Article 3, or SB 821, call for projects. So SB 821 is a discretionary program administered by the commission to fund local bicycle and pedestrian projects. Eligible projects include construction of bicycle lanes, sidewalks, and ADA curb ramps, and the development of bicycle and pedestrian master plans. The program is funded through the Local Transportation Fund, or LTF, which is a state sales tax. On every odd numbered year, the commission conducts a competitive call for projects. This year's call for projects opened on February 1st and closed on April 29th. We received a total of 35 applications with a total funding request of $9.8 million. Our funding capacity for this year was $4.3 million. This year's evaluation committee included staff from Caltrans District 8, CVAG, Indian Wells, RTA, WRCOG, and SBCTA. On May 11th, the evaluation committee met and scored the project applications based on the commission's adopted evaluation criteria. Staff recommends funding allocations for 15 projects that scored a 40 or above, totaling $4.3 million. And for your convenience, I put together a map that shows the locations of the 15 projects. Can we pull that up, please? Great. So additionally, the city of Rancho Mirage submitted 3 applications with a total funding request of $1.2 million. The 3 applications each received more than 40 points. However, funding all 3 applications exceed the $865,000 cap as stipulated in the guidelines. Staff offered 2 options to city staff. First, prioritize the 3 projects or adjust the funding request for each application. City staff opted to prioritize the Bob Hope Drive Access Ramp Retrofit Project and the San Jacinto Drive Corridor Walkway and Sidewalk Improvements Project. A summary of the recommended allocation is provided in the staff report. Similar to past cycles, Coachella Valley continues to compete well in the program, with 34% of the funding going to the city of Coachella Valley, which is well above the region's fair share. Staff will monitor the mid-year LTF projections in January 2022 to determine if more funding is available to fund additional projects on the list. That completes my report, and I could take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on item number 11? And nothing from the public, I assume?
No.
Okay, so I entertain a motion, please.
Cathedral City moves approval.
Desert seconds.
And a roll call, please.
District 2,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside.
Yes.
Thank you. That item passes.
Next item is number 12, fiscal years 21-22 through 25-26, Measure A, 5-year capital improvement plans for the local streets and roads program. Martha Masters, you have a report for us.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. This item is for approval of the Measure A 5-year capital improvement plans for the local streets and roads program. I'll start with some background for the local streets and roads program, which I will refer to as LSR for short. Next slide, please. As outlined in the Measure A ordinance, Measure A funding is allocated between 3 geographic areas within Riverside County. As you can see, LSR is one of a variety of programs funded by Measure A. These LSR funds allow local agencies to fund road maintenance and operations, road repairs, street improvements, and new infrastructure. Since 2009, local agencies have received over $571 million from this funding program. For fiscal year 21-22, it's projected that over $59 million will be available to the local agencies. These funds are distributed as follows on the next slide. In Western County and Palo Verde, the allocations are based on a 75-25 split of proportionate population and sales tax revenues generated within each jurisdiction. Population projections are derived from the State Department of Finance. In Coachella Valley, the allocations are based on a 50-50 split between dwelling units and sales tax revenues generated within each jurisdiction. The allocation projections by agency for the next 5 years can be found in attachment 1. Next slide, please. In order to receive these funds, the local agency must participate in CVAG or WRCOG's TUMF program. In Western County, agencies are required to participate in the multiple species habitat conservation plan as applicable. The Measure A ordinance also requires participating agencies to annually submit a 5-year CIP list of projects, a certification of maintenance of effort as applicable, and a project status report for the prior year CIP. Next slide. The required plans and supporting documentation have been received from all participating Measure A agencies and have been received by staff to ensure compliance with Measure A requirements and confirm CIP Measure A LSR projects are consistent with the state's guidelines for gas tax expenditures. These CIP documents are included as attachment 2. Eligibility determinations related to participation in the TUMF and MSHCP programs as applicable are pending verification, but are expected to be verified by the June Commission meeting. For fiscal year 21-22 CIP, there are a total of 241 projects planned for the entire county. Most of these projects fall under the pavement rehabilitation category. Disbursements of these funds are expected to occur in September. Next slide. The recommendation before the committee is to approve fiscal year 21-22 through 25-26 Measure A CIPs for local streets and roads as submitted by the participating agencies and forward to the commission for final action. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on this item? And anything from the public? Okay.
Nothing.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Keller Mason moves to approve.
Palm Springs second.
Thank you. We'll take a roll call.
District 2,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert, Palm Desert, Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside.
Yes.
Thank you. That item does pass.
All right. Thank you. Next item, we have no items pulled from the consent calendar. And we'll go into Commissioner Staff Report. Item provides the opportunity for commissioners and staff to report on attended and upcoming meeting, conferences, and issues related to commission activities. Do we have any comments or reports from the commissioners? How about the staff?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. So at the start of the meeting, there was a comment about when are we going to be back in person. So let me tell you what we're thinking right now. I had chatted with the chair about this, but as everything else has been a little unpredictable, this is all subject to change. So we've been kind of looking at the fact that we really don't know what the rules are going to be after June 15th, if there are now going to be any rules. So the preliminary plan was that we would stay in a virtual meeting environment for the remaining 3 meetings between now and July. We would go dark in August, so there would be no meeting at the end of July, no committee meetings at the end of July, no commission meeting in the middle of August. And our focus would be on a return to in-person meetings or hybrid meetings in September, so August and September. Given that the commission is so large and the committees are pretty large as well, we're really not sure what the rules are going to be. So that had kind of been the plan. We'll stay virtual for the next 3 meetings, and then take the month of August to start preparing for how we go back to in person. So it's kind of the plan right now. Now, I said before, that's all subject to change. My understanding is that there if the emergency order gets lifted, then the Brown Act accommodations that were made will change. So anytime between now and June 15th, the Brown Act rules could change, and Brown Act will dictate what we do. So of course, we have to comply with the law. That is the priority. So whatever happens with the Brown Act could potentially drive us to have to come back in person sooner than we had anticipated. We've also received feedback from some of our board members who want to see a hybrid option remain in place. So I think we're going to take the next probably 6 weeks and figure out what is the law, what are the rules, and what are the wishes of the commission, because we've got a lot of moving pieces here. So stay tuned. Our goal is to be, though, however, predictable for commissioners and predictable for the public. We don't want to be in a situation where we say, oh, we're planning on coming back in, and the public thinks we're coming back into in person, and then something happens and we have to switch back to virtual. So we want to make sure that the public knows what to expect from the commission. So just stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Well, thank you. I know we're going through that in our city, and my employer is also weighing those measures as well. I do know that I missed the speed button to do the motions and the seconds. We got those done real quick before. But anyways, are there any other comments or reports? So seeing no others, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And our next meeting will be June 28th. And that'll be here at 9:30. We'll see you all then.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
week.
you.